Welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this farmhouse table with a distressed leg look for a client. I hope you enjoy. I used 2x6 boards for the top of this table. Put them on your miter saw, measure it 63 inches and make a nice clean cut. I cut 7 pieces just like that for the top of the table and 2 more for an adjoining bench that I'm going to be making as well. Next, I take those long pieces for the top of my table and using my Craig jig, I'm going to drill out some pocket holes to eventually attach the top of this table together. For the purposes of this video, I'm only showing you how I created the table, but keep in mind that I also created a bench using the same methods at a smaller scale. After all my pocket holes are drilled out, I'm going to start to put together the top of my table. I line up 2 boards perfectly on one side and clamp them down as tight as I can get. Then I'll come back and screw the boards together using Craig screws and the pocket holes that I already drilled out. I repeat this process all the way down the boards, screwing in as many different places as I can to make sure my gaps and my seams are nice and tight. I'm going to continue this process by adding on a 3rd board and following the same exact procedure of clamping the boards together and then screwing the boards together using my Craig screws and the holes that I drilled out with my Craig jig. Continue this process until all 7 of your boards are put together. After all 7 boards are put together, I'm going to add a 2x4 on the end of each side of my tabletop. Again, clamping down the 2x4, drilling out for pocket holes, and screwing together using my Craig screws. Let's focus on the legs now. I'm taking 4x4 posts and cutting a 45-degree angle on each side of the post. Repeat this process 4 times for your table and 4 times for your bench. Then, take some 2x4 blocks for the feet of our table legs. I'm going to first pre-drill some holes in these 2x4s so that way when I come back and screw them together, I don't split the 2x4 block of wood. Always make sure that you're screwing these below the surface of the wood, so that way when this flips over, the screw and the metal part will not be rubbing on the floor of your kitchen. I cut a notch out of this top 4x4 post for a half lap joint later on. If you want to learn how to create half lap joints, check out my channel where I have a nice, easy video to follow. I'm going to again use my Craig jig to screw these pieces together for my legs. You can see my legs are starting to take form. I connect the 2 sides of my legs using a 4x4 post in the same Craig jig method I've used prior. Then I take a 2x4 and I'm going to lay it in that half flap joint that I created. Measure to make sure it's equal distant on both sides, and then screw it into place. This 2x4 will provide extra stability, especially for the ends of the table where people are most likely to push off when they're standing up from their seat. To make my X design on both sides of my legs, I cut some 4x4 posts with 45-degree angles at approximately 10 inches in length from one point to the next. I'm going to place my 4x4 angled pieces on these legs and nail them together, forming my X shape and design. I wanted to add a little design inside of these legs as well, so I took some 2x4s, cut them to length, and put a 22.5-degree angle cut on each side. Once I have them where I want them, I'm going to go ahead and screw them into place, again using the same Kreg screws that I've used throughout this entire project. I like to use my orbital sander to finish the top of this table. I start by using a coarse grit sandpaper to knock off any rough patches and to level everything out even more. Then I apply a medium grit sandpaper and do a second pass over the top of this entire table. Finally, I'll do a third pass using a fine grit sandpaper to make sure that this table is smooth enough to eat off of. This is the part of the process that nobody likes to do. It's time consuming and it's tedious. But if you want to produce the best quality table, this is something that you really need to spend a lot of time on. The client selected an American Walnut Stain. I'm going to stain this entire table first. I like to use a brush when I'm staining the legs, and then we'll come back with a rag to wipe clean. Staining the legs is actually just going to serve as a base coat for this project. The client wanted white legs with a distressed look. I first had to apply the stain so that way when I distress these legs, you can see the stain pop through. My second step of this process is going to be to take white paint and paint over top of everything that I just stained. After 2 coats of white paint, I'm going to take medium grit sandpaper and sand down certain areas of this table that I could imagine being kicked by somebody's shoe. I'm going to sand off just the white paint and expose that American Walnut Stain underneath it. I tend to under-distress the table instead of overdoing it, just because I tend to like the look when it's not super distressed. And now it's time to seal the top of my table. To do this, I'm going to use Varathane's triple thick polyurethane. Don't be tricked into thinking that 1 coat is enough since the product says triple thick. I still use 3 coats of this triple thick polyurethane on the top of my table. I kept the top of the table and the table legs separated so that way we could move them to the client's house easier just due to the weight and the size of this table. Once we got to the client's house, I attached the legs to the top of the table using Kreg screws underneath. You can see that this table looks absolutely amazing, and it turned out awesome with the color choices. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button for me.